Look, I know it's been years since the final season of Game of Thrones aired, but I swear, this still keeps me up at night. Like, how do you take one of the most epic fantasy shows ever made and give it the dumbest battle strategy in TV history? I'm talking about the Battle of Winterfell, the big showdown between humanity and the undead, the moment we were all waiting for. And what do the creators do? Nothing but humiliate themselves. It's not even just disappointing, it's insulting. Especially when you compare it to how Avatar, The Last Airbender, handled its invasion of the Fire Nation during the solar eclipse. That plan? Smart, strategic, emotionally impactful, actual war logic. So today, we're breaking it down. Why the Game of Thrones battle plan was a hot mess, and why Avatar got it so right. If you've ever yelled at your screen in frustration like I have, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Let's get into it. The Dothraki suicide charge into the dark. Let's talk about the most baffling tactical decision in Game of Thrones history, the Dothraki death charge. You've got one of the most fearsome cavalry forces in the known world. Savage warriors who live and breathe horseback combat. A terrifying, thundering wave of blades and fire. And what does Jon and Daenerys War Council decide to do with this elite unit? They send them charging blindly into pitch-black nothingness. No intel, no scout reports, no formations, no idea how deep the undead stretch. Just a massive, flaming herd of death, galloping straight into, well, actual death. This wasn't a strategy, this was a light show sacrifice. The audience watches in real time as the Dothraki's flaming arcs blink out one by one. And you're sitting there thinking, wait, did they just kill off an entire army for dramatic effect? Yes, they did. And what's worse, they didn't even soften the enemy. The undead barely flinched. The Dothraki accomplished absolutely nothing, except maybe buying the Night King 5 minutes to finish eating some ice chips or something. Let's be real. Whoever approved this maneuver was either A, secretly on Team White Walker, B, had a personal vendetta against the Dothraki, maybe like a Dothraki racist, C, or just straight up a dumbass idiot. And let's not forget, the Dothraki were the last cavalry advantage Westeros had. Gone in 30 seconds. For what? A mood shot? Meanwhile, Sokka, a literal teenager with a boomerang, was out here running actual war simulations and pulling off a coordinated eclipse invasion. But we'll get to that brilliance in a bit. Placing troops outside the walls because you know defense is overrated. Let's just say it. The walls of Winterfell are huge, fortified, and literally built to keep enemies out. So, naturally, the brilliant minds in charge decided to station the majority of their troops outside those very walls. Yup, in wide open space at night, against an enemy that doesn't tire, doesn't feel fear, and doesn't stop. What could possibly go wrong? This is the equivalent of owning a bomb shelter and choosing to fight the nuclear war in your front yard. Instead of drawing the enemy into choke points or using elevation for advantage, they just spread their army out like they were tailgating before a football game. And here's the kicker. Once the undead swarm hits, guess what the soldiers do? Retreat into total chaos. They bottleneck at the gates, trampling each other, while the undead slice through them like butter. If they'd simply waited behind the walls with archers, dragon fire, pouring oil down to the walls, and the trench lit from the start, things could have been very different. But nah, who needs tactical defense when you have plot armor? A strategy that relied entirely on plot armor, not logic. Here's where everything just falls apart. From the moment the undead hit the field, it becomes painfully obvious that this wasn't a battle plan. It was a script outline. Because instead of any real strategy, the entire defense of Winterfell seems to hinge on one thing. Main characters surviving no matter what. Take Sam, for instance. Our beloved bookworm is literally lying in a pile of corpses getting swarmed, and somehow still fine 30 minutes later. Brienne, Jaime, no real plan, but they live. Even Jon Snow, who spends half the battle running around with no idea what's going on, somehow always manages to duck just in time, dodge just enough, and survive long enough to scream at a dragon and whatever else he was doing. This isn't strategy. It's wishful thinking with a high budget. There's no coordinated fallback plan, no flanking, no real communication, just vibes, and the hope that your favourite characters are too important to die yet. They just rolled the dice and prayed the script loved them enough to live another day. And honestly, that's not war strategy. That's lazy writing dressed up in dragonfire. The lack of defensive fortifications. You'd think that if you had literal years to prepare for a battle against the army of the dead, the first thing you'd do is fortify the one place you're planning to make your last stand. Right? Well, not in Winterfell. The walls, low, the trenches, shallow, the barricades, practically decorative. The Night King is bringing a horde of reanimated corpses who feel no pain, fear no death, and never tire. And the best defence the North could come up with was a flammable wooden trench that no one guarded. Let that sink in. There were no spiked pits with fire, no secondary fallback positions, no reinforced gates. They didn't even build raised platforms for archers or proper towers to fire from safely, which maybe later the dead dragon could have destroyed. Nope, this is Winterfell, a centuries-old fortress, and it was treated like an open-air theatre on a windy night. And don't even get me started on the crypts. Yes, the fucking crypts that still boils my blood. You know the story. The Just Forgot. The place where they sent all the women and children to stay safe, in a place literally full of corpses, while fighting an enemy who can raise the dead. What an absolute group of geniuses. It's like no one asked, hey, what are the undead really good at? And then built the exact opposite of what was needed. Bottom line, for a battle they knew was coming for seasons, the lack of preparation was so bad, it borders on criminal negligence. Honestly, we're lucky they remembered to light the torches. And the worst part is they still fucking won. So how big an idiot is this guy? Now compare that chaos to the sheer brilliance of the invasion plan in Avatar, The Last Airbender. While the North fumbled every possible defense, Sokka and Team Avatar approached their assault on the Fire Nation with military precision, creativity, and actual logic. From stealth submarines to synchronized attacks during a brief window of vulnerability, the solar eclipse, everything was calculated, coordinated, and executed with purpose. It's the kind of strategy that makes you realize how rushed this whole season was. Precise timing with the solar eclipse. Unlike the baffling randomness of the Battle of Winterfell, the invasion of the Fire Nation capital was built around a very specific and powerful advantage: the solar eclipse. The Avatar team didn't just hope for the best or charge in blindly. They planned everything around the narrow window when firebenders would lose their powers. Sokka's strategy was a masterclass in timing. They waited until the moment the eclipse began to launch their final assault, knowing it was their only chance to confront the Fire Lord while he was powerless. It wasn't just about brute force, it was about precision. The invasion force used submarines to stay undetected, emerged just before the eclipse, and coordinated every movement to strike during that critical few minutes of elemental silence. That level of foresight, that's not just smart, that's next-level military genius, and it's exactly what was missing in Winterfell. Use of specialized technology. The Fire Nation invasion wasn't just smart, it was innovative. Instead of sending troops charging blindly into battle, like a certain fantasy series we won't name again, Team Avatar came prepared with cutting-edge technology. Well, cutting edge for a steampunk fantasy world. Enter the submarines. Designed by the brilliant mechanist and powered by ingenuity, and maybe a few steam vents, these vessels allowed the invasion force to bypass the heavily fortified Fire Nation coast undetected. That's right, these guys were literally sneaking under enemy radar. And that's not all. They had tanks crawling up walls, gliders soaring through the sky, and mechanized tools adapted for stealth and assault. Every piece of tech served a purpose: efficiency, speed, and most importantly, surprise. No pointless charges, no exposing troops to needless risk, just clever use of resources to gain the upper hand. This is something I just loved about the writers. They got all the other friends of Team Avatar to join the invasion and help them defeat the Fire Lord. Failure came from deception, not strategy, and they still had minimal casualties. Here's the key difference. The invasion of the Fire Nation should have worked. The plan was airtight, the timing was perfect, the technology was top tier, and the strategy itself? Genius. So why did it fail? Not because of poor planning, but because of deception. Azula, ever the manipulative prodigy, deliberately stalled the heroes, buying just enough time for the eclipse to end. And with Fire Lord Ozai tucked safely away in a hidden, heavily guarded bunker, the main objective, taking him out, became impossible. But here's where it gets really impressive. Even after being blindsided and realizing they'd walked into a trap, Team Avatar didn't crumble. They executed a swift, orderly retreat. No chaotic collapse, no senseless slaughter. Thanks to their backup plans and strategic foresight, casualties were minimal. They lived to fight another day, and that's not something we can say about the flaming wreck of a battle that was Winterfell. In short, the failure wasn't in the strategy. It was in trusting that their enemy would play fair. Spoiler alert, villains don't. But good strategists always have an exit plan, and that's exactly what made this operation so smart. Emotional and moral victory. Even though the mission didn't succeed in taking down Fire Lord Ozai, the invasion of the Fire Nation during the solar eclipse still delivered something far more powerful: hope. Think about it. For a world that had lived under the tyranny of the Fire Nation for 100 years, this bold move by the ragtag resistance wasn't just a military operation. It was a statement, a declaration that they wouldn't sit back and wait for balance to be restored. They would fight for it. The invasion united benders and non-benders alike, brought together unlikely allies, and proved that strategy, courage, and unity could challenge even the most powerful empire in the world. Even in retreat, they held their heads high. The world saw that the Fire Nation could be infiltrated, that the Avatar and his allies were no longer just a myth or a dream. They were a real threat to the regime. And emotionally, this battle hardened them. It gave Sokka the experience he needed to grow into a true leader. It showed Katara the stakes of war. It reminded Aang what was truly at risk, and what kind of strength it would take to win without losing himself. Sometimes the most important victories aren't measured in territory taken or enemies defeated. They're measured in what they awaken, and this battle awakened a revolution. So yeah, that's my take or rant or whatever you want to call it. I hope you enjoyed this video. It takes a lot of time and effort for me to make it, so please like, subscribe and share it. It would mean a lot.